say a few words to you.
All right, well, thanks. Yeah, thanks again for coming today. It was just, when I pulled up at a little after 10, I didn't expect to see the large crowd already. This only started at 11, but what a perfect place to have a little bit of fellowship, hanging out and talking about a lot of the historical times that we're hanging out here. And I could, as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about back then in the 1800s when this was just all beach here, and how the boats would pull up and pick up the people to take them across to, you know, bring them to Canada. And you could just kind of picture that in your mind about how that was all set up back in the day. I thought that was, I love history, and I love the fact that Dave comes into my office about every 2 or 3 weeks, and we go over different parts of what's going on in Hilton and Parma in the old days. I just love that part of it. So thanks again for coming out, and hopefully we'll have a great program and some lunch afterwards over at Foster's. All right,
Thanks, Jim, and thank you for your support in getting our historical marker up, and to the town board, and to Phil Smith and Kyle. Phil standing over by the willow tree, he got it put up yesterday, so it's like brand new. Nobody's really seen it yet. So thank you very much. Now, I have a few things to read here as part of the dedication. I want to thank Nancy Laporte. Nancy took all the research that I found about the Vaughn family, and she very expertly put it into narrative, and that's what I want to read here. Following our event, I will, or Amanda and Nancy will pass out this program to you that you can have. It'll cover everything I've talked about. So, Walter Vaughn and the Vaughn family. Walter Vaughn was born in 1826 and he died in 1898. He was the third of 5 sons born to Nero and Mary Vaughn. Nero was a freed slave from Vermont who had settled in Parma at Hiscock Mill, that's down where the Braddock's Bay Hotel is, in the 1830s. A few years after arriving in Parma, Nero passed away and he left Mary, who was also known as Auntie Vaughn back in the day, to raise William, John, Walter, Ansel, and Ansel is the ancestor of all the people that are here today. Mary Ann and Elijah on her own. Fortunately, some of the older boys were older and could go out and do farm work and things and help the family. She was a well-respected person for her work ethic, her high morals, and deep religious convictions, always rising above the world's trials and cares. The family history has been documented by several residents in Parma who actually knew the Vaughn family. These were done back in the early 1900s. Our editor of the Hilton Record, Charles Cooper, reached for some of the old-timers to write their memories. And fortunately, we have all those records today that have given us what we're talking about today. This Vaughn history is a treasured part of Parma Hilton history. I actually heard about it from Mrs. Ferguson, who lived in the Blue House over there. Her father, George Wright, bought this property from Walter and Elijah back in the 1880s or 90s. They'd gotten, Elijah had gone to Michigan, Walter was getting older and didn't want to fish anymore. And so Albert Wright bought the property and he built the house that you can pass over there. It's a blue house up on a little bit of a knoll. He built that in about 1892 and gave it to his daughter Emma when she married Irv Ferguson as a wedding gift. And they lived here with no other buildings here, and they had this whole lakeshore to themselves. But hard times fell on them around 1910. The farm didn't work out. They were having monetary problems, and they went up to A.B. Fraser at Hilton, who was the banker, and said, "We're having trouble paying our bill at the general store. We want to do it, but, you know, can you wait?" Well, he said, "If you'd like to trade some of the lakefront for settling the bill." She said, "Would you?" He said, "Absolutely." So he got 5 lots down here, and he built the second and the third cottage. But he hired her husband, Irv, to build them. So they had a nice source of income. And then the pumping station came in soon after, that little brick building down there. and Irv got the job to be the guy to watch the pumps down there, and he held that job from 1915 till he died in 1957, and he actually died on the job at 84 or something. So that was kind of interesting. So when Annie Vaughn was left a widow with 6 children to care for, she managed by weaving cloth, blankets, and carpets. One resident remembers her as a good old soul as ever walked the earth, and everyone who knew her loved her. Her testimonies at the Baptist Church in Hilton were described as bringing heaven down to earth. She was so full of the Holy Spirit. Eventually, the family settled on the Barrage Farm, where they lived for many years. It is located on North Avenue, just north of Bartlett's Corners. And today, when we take a little ride around, we'll show you where that house stood. It's no longer there. It unfortunately burned in the 1960s. William and John both left Hilton for Michigan. These are the 2 older sons, and they both served in the Civil War, which is interesting. William purchased land for a farm in Kent County, Michigan, and the log cabin that he built initially was replaced by a much larger farmhouse. And there is a picture in the program of that farmhouse, which Amanda found online, and is a nice piece of history on William's side. Ira Cross from Parma here was the executor of Walter's will. He shared his recollections of the family in 1936 when he was 86, which was published in the Hilton newspaper, the Hilton Record. He commented, "A story is told of one of the sons, John, who had moved to Michigan after he had grown up, about a wrestling match between him and a Civil War veteran who had gained quite a reputation in the war as a wrestler. This guy lived over in Sandy Creek in Hamlin. When John came back to visit North Parma, which was what Hilton was known as then, his friends arranged a bout between the 2 men. A platform 16 feet square was erected on the green where the intersection of Hovey Street and Main Street is now. That's where the Arlington Hotel stands, or the Arlington restaurant, I should say. A $40 purse of gold was raised for the winner of 2 falls out of 3. Ira Cross in his memoir said, "Oh yes, I was there and I was happy to see Jack, the Negro, lay his opponent on his back twice in a short time." Ansel married Lucy McWhorter, who was the daughter of a former slave known as Freed Frank. He founded a town in Illinois called New Philadelphia, and he was the first African American to do so, to found a town. But today it's Walter we're honoring, and Walter's honor centers on his occupation and his commitment to justice. Walter was a fisherman. He was also a farmer. He had a boathouse on Lake Ontario shore, now known as Hilton Beach. Also he had a sailboat. And he and his brother Elijah would travel 2 to 3 miles out in the lake north, where they'd lay their nets and catch whitefish, which they would sell to the people down in Charlotte, the restaurants, and whoever else might want fish. The lake back then was not polluted. It was all fresh. It was just natural, and so there were many fish, sturgeon, all kinds of interesting things. Walter would conceal escaping slaves from the south. The northern terminus of the Underground Railroad in Parma was where Walter's boathouse stood, and it stood right over there in front of Tom Wilson's house under a willow tree. At least that's what's written in history. And it is well documented that Walter was a conductor on the Underground Railroad, and his boathouse a stop on that journey. Walter would conceal escaping slaves from the south and under moonlight row them along the lakeshore to awaiting Canadian ships, either at the Niagara or Genesee rivers, and then they would be sailed to freedom, usually over in St. Catharines, Ontario. This was a remarkable act of bravery on Walter's part, and one doubtless that saved many lives for those fleeing the horrors of slavery in the South. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 said if you're caught aiding and abetting a fugitive, 1 year in jail and a $1,000 fine. And a $1,000 fine would be like $100,000 today. So Walter was taking a lot of chances, as were others. Isaac Chase, Gideon Archer, different people in Parma, and people all up and down the lakeshore. It was a whole different world back then. Today we remember and honor that bravery with a permanent historical marker dedicating this site to a man from Parma Hilton we are proud to call a resident who made a difference in the world. Addendum. In 1871, William Cox and his wife sold this land and the boat that the boathouse was on to Walter and his brother. And ironically today, William Cox's great-great-great-great-grandson, Jerry Pickett, is with us. So, Jerry, would you like to say anything?
Oh, I'm just, I wish he had held on to the property.
There you go. Good luck. So in the program, you'll see a picture of the deed. I happen to have the deed up in the historian's office. These deeds and abstracts are wonderful for getting accurate history. And on the back of the page here, we have the only picture of Bond's son, and that's thanks to Loni of Ansel Bond, who was the third or fourth son. And he's 86 in this picture. And I'm going to let Loni talk a little more about that, and Gloria. This is the picture of the house of William Bond. And then here we have a picture of Loni, who was here 5 or 6 years ago, once we'd restored the Dunbar Cemetery, and she came to see the graves of Walter and Nero. And then finally on the back page is Nero's picture. And Nero's gravestone is in beautiful condition. People say, how'd that happen? Well, two things. Possibly it was better marble, but what I think happened is it was face down on the ground for about 50 years. And when we pulled it up and restored it, the bugs and the things, the worms had taken any bad stuff off it, so it's clear as a bell today. On the back, Mary Archer Stevens, who also is one of Jerry's ancestors, was the first historian in the town of Parma. In 1919, after World War I, the governor of New York State mandated that every town and village in the state of New York have a historian, and that still holds today. And Mary Archer was the obvious historian in that day, and the reason was to take inventory on all the World War I soldiers so we wouldn't lose that history. And Mary was also a great writer and a great poet. And Charles Cooper asked her to do a little thing for the Hilton Record, and so she came up with this letters from Jim to Jack. She wrote it all by herself, but she didn't want to have her name on it, I guess, in case she might offend somebody. But there's a little section in there about Walter Bond, which nobody ever notices, but we found it, and that's on the back page here, and it says, Walter Bond would bring a load to church of people up from the north. The north means up here. Going south, you're going to Spencerport. You remember, Jack, how he would take us out in his sailboat on the 4th? And he would take the fugitive slaves where they never could be found by their masters. Well, his boat was part of the railway underground. Where Walter had his boathouse on the lakeside north of town has now sprung up a village of cottages, white and brown. It is a pleasant place to visit, to stay a day or a week. The worst of all is leaving there, but of that we will not speak. And that concludes my part of the program, and now I'd like to have Gloria and Loni say a few words on behalf of the Bond family.
Okay.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Glora Watts, and I'm a descendant of Walter Bond. I would first, though, like to thank the people who organized this event. Yeah. I know that you have done a lot of research and put a lot of effort into bringing this event about. I like to thank Mr. Roose, the Supervisor, the Historical Society, Mr. Foster, and of course Dave Crumb for their efforts.
Thank you.
What we're going to do, I wanted to tell you about some of the descendants of Frank Bond, Mr. Bond, Walter Bond, and what they've done over the years. So I handed out a picture, in that picture you will see Ansel Bond. The gentleman sitting is Ansel Bond. He's my great-great-grandfather, and he's one of Walter Bond's, as he mentioned, one of Walter Bond's brothers. Ansel, you want to talk about Ansel for a few minutes?
Sure. So Ansel lived here up until probably shortly after 1850. And then he was working on, what is his name, Chauncey Curtis?
Chauncey Curtis.
He worked on Chauncey Curtis's farm when he was up here. And when he left, he went to Illinois. And he went to Hadley Township, which was the town that our great-great-great-great-grandfather, Free Frank, founded in 1836. So in 1858, he met Frank's youngest daughter, Lucy Ann, and they married. So from one of those children, Lucy Vaughn, she was my grandmother's mother. So that's kind of how, and we always wondered, why would Ansel leave here and go to Illinois? Well, Free Frank and the town that he founded was also an abolitionist town. And Frank was also involved in the purchasing of his family out of bondage. So we figured that that was probably the main reason that Ansel would have left here to go to Illinois.
And also, if you look at the picture, sitting next to, in the other chair next to Ansel, is his daughter. That is Lucy Vaughn Thomas. She's my great-grandmother. She lived in New Philadelphia and married William Thomas. They migrated to Oklahoma following their daughter, Annie Thomas Watts. They assisted their daughter on the family farm, and her biggest impact was in the education of the town, of the children in the area in Oklahoma. In an article, there is a book on the schools that they established in Oklahoma. It was a log cabin that they built themselves. I'll read you an excerpt from that particular book called Territorial Days, Chapter 2. In the year 1906, the few families who lived in this community decided to have a school for their children. There were only 3 families here at that time: the Thomases, which is her family, the Knoxes, and the Walkers. They assisted in building the first schoolhouse. It was a 1-room log cabin school. They riveted slabs and boards to cover it, and it had 2 openings, 1 door and 1 window. The location was 1 1/4 miles south of near Skull Creek, wherever that is, I don't know, Skull Creek, in a wooded section. The furniture was crude and limited. There were few homemade benches and a table for the teacher. The first term was taught by Miss Lucy Thomas, who you see there. She was also the patron of the community. Her salary was paid by the patrons of the community. It amounted to whatever they could pay her. No extra money or anything was given to her. She taught the term from 1906 to 1905 in the log cabin. Then when Oklahoma finally became a state, because before then it was known as Indian Territory. When it became a state in 1907, they decided to build a different school to go to, which made her very happy. And so she taught in that school also from the terms from 1908 to 1904. And this second school, however, was some distance from her home. She would walk 3 miles there and 3 miles back every day to teach at the school. And I was looking at 3 miles, I says, I can't walk 3 miles back. I'd be crazy to try that, but she did that every day to teach the children in that area. After it became a state, she was then became the first African-American woman in Creek County, Oklahoma, to teach at a school and receive a salary from the government at that time. So that is the picture you see there of her sitting. Behind her stands Annie Thomas. That's my grandmother. She lived in Sapulpa, Oklahoma. She migrated there with her husband, Howard Wesley Watts, to have a farm. And on the farm is where they did all of their work and raised their children throughout the years. I, of course, am, my father was Howard Wesley Watts Jr. And I am one of his descendants, so I guess I'll tell you a little about myself. I was born in Sapulpa, Oklahoma. However, my father and my mother, of course, were married and lived there, but my mother was a Bostonian. She didn't like the area. So eventually she says, we have to leave. I cannot, she couldn't take it anymore, basically. So she put me and my brother on a train at that time, and we rode back up to Boston, where she lived her entire life. And 2 months later or so, my father followed, and we were there in Boston ever since for the last 60 or more years. She never went back. We would only go back for vacations. And so I was, of course, went to Boston Public Schools. I eventually, I ended up going to the University of Massachusetts, and that's where I got my BA degree from, was the University of Massachusetts. After that, I worked for the U.S. Department of Treasury for 30 years. I was in charge or director of all tax auditors in the whole state of Rhode Island and also in southern Massachusetts. And then I retired after 30 years, and I still live now in Massachusetts. I also have a brother. His name is Howard. Again, the names keep continuing. Howard Wesley Watts the third is his particular title. He, of course, also went to Boston Public Schools. He was a veteran in the military for 3 years. He then went on to Boston University and then received his master's in education from Cambridge College in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He worked for, I don't know if you've heard of Verizon, you know Verizon. He worked, was a director for Verizon for a number of years as a director, and he was eventually transferred to New York City as a director. And he worked there for some 20 years as a director in New York City. And then he decided to take up a new line, a new avenue. So he was hired by a company called Alignment Strategies and was director of new business development for that corporation. At that particular job, he was able to produce and direct a play, a musical play that crossed the country. It was on the life of Dorothy Hyatt. I don't know if you know her, but she was a civil rights leader, Dorothy Hyatt, and it went clear across the country as he was the producer and the director. Based upon that work, Fox Corporation saw his work, and he was hired by Fox Entertainment to be their director of diversity and development. And he worked for them for a number of years to his retirement. He lives now on Cape Cod, Mass. So that was my brother Howard. Again, Annie, if you look at the picture, the one standing behind the lady sitting, she also had other children. Another one of her children was Geneva Ban, her only daughter. Geneva lived in Sapulpa, Oklahoma, and she continued to live there. And her children, two were military veterans. Another one, Vincent, attended Tulsa College and was a manager of computer systems for the Department of Finance for the city of Denver. And her youngest son is Kevin. He decided not to spend his time behind a desk or in an office. I was talking to Vincent the other day saying, well, how do I describe Kevin to everybody? And we came up with only one term. He's a cowboy. He's a cowboy. He has horses. He does rodeos, participates in rodeos, and he worked on a cattle ranch. So Kevin is a cowboy. That was his particular line. And as far as other children of Annie, she had another son, Clement, who worked for the McDonnell Douglas aircraft in California. And they have a number of daughters. One of their granddaughters is a graduate of Howard University, and she's teaching now. And then we had, grandfather, Reginald. You want to talk about him for a minute?
Sure, I guess. Yeah, the baby in the picture you have is my father.
He's sitting on the lap.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can barely see him, but he's there.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things I remember about my father, and you didn't mention it, was attending the Lawrence School in Sapulpa, which was a school privately founded by a former slave for people of color, which not just people of African American descent, but also a lot of Indians in Oklahoma. So as my dad was growing up, he had a pretty rich background in cultural diversity with the Indians from Oklahoma, which were the 5 civilized tribes, as well as the black community. And the interesting thing that I see about Sapulpa, Oklahoma is as soon as the kids were able to leave, they did, other than Uncle Clem went to California, Uncle Howard went to Boston, and my dad and Uncle Al went west. This was during the Depression. They wound up, my father wound up in Portland, Oregon with an uncle who moved out there from Illinois. And he crossed over the line and decided he wasn't going to be black anymore because there weren't any advantages in that. So he lived as a white man in Oregon. And my uncle Al, who looked like a big Indian, actually, he made the same change. And after the war, he was a pilot in World War II, and after the war, he went to Alaska, which kind of was one of the reasons I went to Alaska, to see my uncle. So quite a spreading from Sapulpa, Oklahoma, which has always impressed me. It must not be a very nice place to live. And when I was there, I didn't really enjoy it either. But yeah, family just spread across the country. And Uncle Al had 4 kids, 2 of whom have passed away, Marcia and Dick, and, well, 3. And then my 2 cousins, Mark and Steve, who are twins, and Steve passed away here just this spring. My brother, my youngest brother, passed away last year, and now I have myself and my brother Don both live in Fairbanks with grandkids, and now I've got great grandkids down in Wisconsin. So we move around a lot.
8 generations of the Bond family.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Lonnie, is there anything?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
I'll go ahead. Okay, so the other lady in the picture, the young girl that's standing behind Ansel, is my grandmother, Marie Thomas. And she married my grandfather, Lonnie Kelly, when they were in Oklahoma. And they migrated to Colorado. So that's where I was born and raised, was born in Brush, in the country where they were at the time, and then shortly after I was born, they moved into the city of Denver. My grandfather was on the railroad, so they moved to Denver. I went to Denver public schools. I was educated in Denver, a BA in business administration and finance. I worked for the city and county of Denver for the mayor's office of economic development. And then I got this idea I wanted to go into the private sector. So I started working for an investment company, Janus Investment. And that job took me to Texas. And I was there, our office was there for probably about maybe 3 or 4 years. And then they decided, it was owned by a bunch of railroad guys. They didn't know how to run or manage an investment company, so they decided we're just going to shut you down. So I moved to Houston, and I started working for American International Group, AIG, and they're in insurance. So I was a plan coordinator. So I managed investments for mainly school districts, so all across the country. So I retired from that position in 2017, and then I moved up here. So just to give you a little idea as to where some of the other descendants live and what they've done in their lives, we've had military. We probably have had military in every generation, Civil War, maybe even before that, if I haven't discovered that yet. And every war, ever since then, we've had someone either fought in the war or were a part of the military. And even right now, today, the next generation, they're even involved in the military. We have school teachers, we have doctors, we have nurses. Those are just some of the ones that I can read. Entrepreneurs, big entrepreneurs, especially the next generation under me, and then the generation under that are pretty much entrepreneurs. And they live in Colorado. The majority are in Colorado, then California, Arizona, my family's in Texas. I think that's about all that I can remember about where they're at. We're just spread out all over. Too many places to even, try to keep up with. They're younger than me, so I'm not trying to keep up with what everyone's doing in their lives. They don't want me to, so.
Hopefully you'll have a family reunion up here in Parma sometime.
Yeah,
Bring
that
them
would
all
be.
up to. This might not be big enough, but we've got a big park up
Yeah.
That would be great. The other thing that I want to say about Gloria, Dave, and myself is that we started a nonprofit, and it was mainly to repair the cemetery of our ancestor, Free Frank, where him and his wife and 7 of their children and some of the other African Americans that were in the town that he formed. And I just want to thank Dave and everyone else, especially Dave, because he put up with me over the years in my research questions that I had, and always very, very polite and generous, just wonderful. I can't say enough about this man right here and what he has done to make this day possible for us. And I'm really, really grateful, and thank you for everyone, everything, whatever it is that you did, even if you didn't do anything. I'm grateful. I'm very grateful for it.
Thank you, Lonnie. That was wonderful. Tom Venero's going to give us our concluding remarks.
There's not much I can say, but thank you. This was such a wonderful experience, and thank you for the family for coming here, and for all of you to be here to support, Walter and this memorial here. One thing I will add before we unveil the sign is that we plan to, Phil Smith and Kyle McDonald, our parks crew, they came here and cleaned this area up a lot, and it's a beautiful little spot. I hope you enjoy the weather we ordered for you today. It's not like this that often in October at this point of the year. So one thing we are looking forward to doing is furthering those efforts, beautifying this area, putting some seating in place so that people can come here and visit and learn more and enjoy this beautiful area for years to come. So thank you very much for coming.
Just a few other remarks. We're going to be, a number of us are going to be having lunch up at Foster's, and Dave, you know how to get there from here. Most of us know how to get there. So that'll be at 12 o'clock, and it's now 11:36, so we've got plenty of time. Jim and I are going to unveil the sign, so you'll be the first to have seen it. And one other thing is on April 8th, the Great American Solar Eclipse is going to come right over Walter's sign here, probably about 3 o'clock. It'll also be going over Texas about 1:30. I don't know if there's any greater thought on that, but something that occurred to me that you might want to keep in mind. So Jim and I will pull this off, hopefully. Don't get a bath in the process.
I think we're gonna have to tear it.
But let's just tear it.
Well, I don't know about that either. This wasn't our first choice of doing it.
We had a black shroud, but because of the rain, we thought we better.
All right, coming your way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bravo. Hey. Read it, Dave. Jim.
Walter Bond was the son of Parma's first African-American family. As a conductor on the Underground Railroad, Walter assisted fugitive slaves from the South to their freedom in Canada in the 1850s. He would take them in his boat from the lakeshore to ships bound for Canada. We would have put more on, but we didn't have room. And it's on the other side for the boaters.
Yeah, the boats can come by and see this side too. It says the same thing.
Oh, really? Oh, good. Yeah, that's nice. Really nice. Thank you. Thank you.
Forever.
Yeah.
Amanda, do you have the program?
Yeah, Nancy's passed them out.
Well done, Chuck.